Thank you very much, Rabbi Urin Halabi, Executive Director, Pan Affairs Foundation. MLP Professor, let's go again. Then I could not catch the other thing. I've been going for it. In the anum adoption, and anum the Mawina action. That's I can't party. Sinakubina, Magana, Obokese. And I invariably, Mamma, I moving food. Same say, same way. My lucky. Mabo na nako banka chia auto dem within na ma ko na attention but America within ana pay for bi ana o de chia me people first auto do I think o man my people different I say what the time na I have to work school if we like man there Museum or one or the area, you get to get what infinity. Because I mean, you there. Then you say about to understand a man, lady man. If you are some say here, yes, yeah, na pardon, that what you most was that one, Anna, Africa, a man, yeah. You best there. I had to make it map with me. We didn't know what you other what you go to watch them again. It wasn't there. School always is here and African. Then you didn't have to. If you mention that, you know, pretend. I am not paying. It's just a everybody. No, all that. Yes, and I am there. I'm a real. But Nana other day there. The animal of woman was not for Sumo. What about you? Another end. Come to the woman. Because I see young come the two there. And the enemy over 4 fears. You want to fear that no other of us as a do. But this is the Sonia, every and I'm going to come here. And said, why am I this is in my room. Never say I had a camera to car. And look at not today, them penny or other about 2 wires was coming to be here. And see, that will be I ever share a prayer margin. Among you folk couldn't pay any above paying for I'm paying naturally. Okay, that's what beyond the 10 work was on. I am a chair young for other view. Button. Oh, yeah, from John Castle, and then pay for baby. If you are Emma, that's what you young day before. Now, yes, them sharpening at nothing. Now, my info was it when the museum when you know one papa takes it and we pay. But that's a good way. Thank you very much. In January, I would like to thank the TMF sponsor, the University. Asabema Kwesi Ata, the second King of Oba, Nana Kobra Kese the fifth King of Isikado, and all the Nanum, and the Excellencies, Honorables, and all family that are here today at the headquarters of Obokese Foundation. primary purpose of our gathering today is that we are here to think about how we can come together to start something new. What is this new stuff I'm talking about? I have been lucky. I was taught by a master teacher in the presence of Rabbi Cohen Hanavi, Executive Director of Manifest Foundation. Nana Koban Ketia the Fifth, the king of Esikado. Nana Kwame the queen of Atenka. I say I'm in 57. And my own brother Atonson. They put something into my head. What they did, you cannot find it in schools in Ghana or in Africa. The schools in Ghana or in Africa, the entire African nations, they keep these things away from us. So the Obokese Foundation and its partners are looking to start something new that will teach what this great man has taught me. There is a book that was authored by Nana Koben, African Culture in Governance and Development, the Ghana Paradigm. This book, to me, if I will not be blasphemous, I will say it's similar to Bible or the Quran, so to speak. It has in it all the solutions we need to solve our problems as Africans. And the Obokese University of Excellence is here today to promote those ideas. So this gathering is to gather all our arsenals, gather all our people together to see how this idea will come to fruition. The President of Ghana, His Excellency, Nana Akufo-Addo, you know what he did? Last year, he declared it the year of 10. And African Americans, Jamaicans, Caribbeans, all the state of Africa trooped to Ghana. This to me has never happened before for the past 400 years. We celebrated Africanness. And now for COVID, I am very sure by now you will see a whole lot of them coming to Ghana to settle and then to do business. So, the Obokese Foundation, together with its partners, let me mention Fraser Nation, the president, Dr. George Fraser, and all the great people in Fraser Nation. Let me mention the African Diaspora Development Institute, Her Excellency Ambassador Arekana Chamboy Kwao. Let me mention Manifest Foundation, all the wonderful people who have been part of this journey. God bless you. This is a demonstration project. We are trying to do something to make a loud statement that when we come together as African people, we can solve our own problems. We have all the solutions inherent in our culture. We are going to promote the philosophy of Asuzi and Ubuntu. This we believe when students internalize this, they will come out as real Africans. We have people walking around in Ghana, in Africa. They have been to school, but they are not Africans because the education system they have been through, it does not teach what Rabbi Cohen teaches. It does not teach what Nana Koben Ketia teaches. It does not teach what Dr. David Whitaker teaches or Nana Obokese Amenki Professor Asebu Omahi teaches. So, I am very happy we are all here, and I believe that this is a new beginning. I will end this by saying that 2 years ago, I had an opportunity to travel with Obokese II, and Honorable Kwame Danka, and also the Mayor of Cape Coast, Honorable Ernest Ada. Now, in our travels, I learned a lot from Obokese II. His passion to bring home our people. So this is an opportune time. The Bible will call it Kairos. We have gathered here the best of minds and the best of intentions for African people in the mother continent, and also across the Pan-African world. We have great people, Her Excellency Ambassador Chembalkwao, Professor Pierre Lumumba, Dr. George Fraser, Sir Hilary Beckles, name them. We are blessed. This moment we have to seize. His Excellency Nana Akufo-Addo has done his part. Central region, Ghana, let's take opportunity. Let's take advantage of this opportunity. Nana, Madam say, Obokese University, Nana Obokese University. Nana Mayan, for the German free alternation, now I much about there means man, na Egua Kana Obama man, no more for Suma as a man, na Ghana man. We went to Mara, Neguye, or other one Kabonchi. I was to Mega. Penfia, Nawako, Boom, Nay, yes, you don't go to me. It's a matter of I say, Yamisha on the way. The Papa Gusa, the Bugaka one, and not a black coordination. That after them, the other was say, Yamisha, Atonka, Odiko, and I'm mind for one, and I play cool the next day. I say by him for net, you go find him for net, then I'm mind for 50 man to minute. Western way to Obokese saying, and I can feel about some man. The one I say, Yamisha, you're very, never a queen, never done yet. But on a way.
And I'm chilling with my bro. I pull me. So, I have my train. Seven pure, the Okodia, Germany. Oye, okay, oye, the no one come on. No, okay, never did him. Multibia, my baba, nature, my Bibia, Orion. Why you couldn't have him now? No, Yasha. Say, I'll show you. Yario, in the sense that be before we're here to Africa, and for our sake in Ghana. And then maybe you could I had this over there. I've been seen and Zaman Okodo. And even the one who back crowd or continues what you prevail. I bet it's not over. Even if I want to know, I'm watching over how what the madam, well, as a good morning, good afternoon, I know to come. I have been so there. Send them all cut the being, yeah, surely, yea, may I Johnson now. That should be one that was here to you, no, so I have a fool, so I will be before you want to come. Into a baby dumb rubber. No, I bet church again. And some are offering I may have it before me ever train. Ya so do, my house was the kitchen. For this year, no one was double hobra. No, the one there. Or yet, at that, only there, yet the two for Mokara. Although in Nara, over here, come for 1 hour, what I say, what the man. If I'm put some, and I put to some beer, all the other one. But you may see, Nasha Sun, but someone, obey na young player. I had to hear cry, oh, you did me. You did not me so I one my young show one day. He had me essay. They asked me about it. No, no, tonight. Yeah, that's also. Well, yeah, Thomas, I think I can find some point. Now, yeah, my hand. Yeah, my, yeah, my. Yanda na ni yanda yuko wetu na yeke so ya yamo from our Into some Traha, Obokese, Meta Witches. But they will probably be out of the main Boko. Na Yamesu Show. Impediment to be over maybe Yaboom, I saw 2 years ago. That should be 1 night to 1 can. Obokese University and now put so. Lecture couldn't wait for it come out. When shall travel school? When day you brought me up a lecture room. You went to wait travel. 4 2 more words to do. What's that like young beer? Young people put no time here. What the answer.
Thank you, Nana. Since we are the host here on site, we have to give a stronger impression when any of our speakers speak. So let's give Nana another round of applause for the words you hear. As the moderator, I'm not going to be speaking long or commenting on the comments to drag us longer. Each one of these speakers that are speaking today are well qualified, and there's a lot that I could say about each one of them, but if I do that, I will drag our program. So just know that they are highly appreciated and highly respected, and that's why they have been asked to speak in their various capacities. So our next speaker to make a solidarity statement for us actually is Professor Chiefttancy Amanfi II.
Just giving the background to the establishment of the Asembo Pan-African Village, and also give some brief background on the establishment of the Obokese University. I just explained that our president went to US and declared the year of return somewhere, I think 2019 or 2018. Late 2018. When he said that, I figured out what we should do to make this more meaningful, not just declaring year of return. We have to do something different. Because our people have been coming all the time, but they come and they go back. And so we decided to offer land for those who want to stay, or those who want to just have some place of abode so that they can come and have their holidays here, or establish their own businesses so that they can run. And so we gave lands, and as I speak, we have the first phase already laid out. We have about 300 plots ready. And as I speak now, we have about 50 people who have already taken their land. And I was explaining that another side of the whole story is the Obokese University. And I was saying, I went to US with quite a number of people, including Nana Obokese Ampam. And I left him behind to do some work for us. And as part of those activities, this idea of Obokese University of Excellence came in. The idea is that we don't have any university that at the moment focuses on culture, focuses on leadership of our people. It's very critical. Of course, we have quite a number of universities in Ghana, and it looks like every year we are opening new universities, either private or public universities. But none of these universities are focusing on leadership role. And also, we want to establish a university, not university for Ghana, but we are establishing university for the black race. An institution where anybody, any black person who finds himself anywhere can come and have knowledge, can come and learn the culture, can come and have inspiration of our people. And that's why we put this thing together. And I was saying I've given 100 acre land for the establishment of this university. I'm happy, and Obokese said it, Rabbi also mentioned it, that we have the endorsement of AU, we have endorsement of our president, Nana Akufo-Addo, for this university to be established. And by November, I think the short curtain will be done. I was saying that we're not doing anything. All what we are doing is not for ASEAN or even for Central region. We are doing it for Africa and indeed for the black race. So I appeal to Nano, and of course I said all those my colleagues who have land available in their terrorist areas can let me know, and we will compile them, and those and we can send some of these projects as they come. I thank everybody for coming, and particularly those who are in the United States. There are quite a number of prominent people behind the whole stuff. So it's not a joke. We are not here to just dance around and go back home and then that's the end. No, there is a huge enthusiasm, a huge interest in our state and beyond. And so we are hopeful that those will come to fruition. We trust God to help us because God plants His people. God put leaders at particular time to change things. And if you don't take advantage of that and you let it go, you lose it. And so this is our time, and I think we shall all be part of the history that we are writing today. So I will also plead with Nanano, particularly the paramount chiefs, that I need your support. I need your help. Together we can do it, but I need the support of all the Amanyene in Central region, particularly all those Nananum at the Central region House of Chiefs. You should change Central region. You should change Chiefttancy institution. You should give back the dignity of traditional of Chiefttancy back to Central region. Central region should take control over things. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning. It's afternoon. From where I come from, we say, Nanano Memamoha. Yes, I bring you greetings from the Ministry of Tourism and the Ghana Tourism Authority. You've had year of return being mentioned by almost all the speakers. And as you are aware, the period and the fulcrum of that program that lasted for 1 year was resident in Ghana Tourism Authority. And we did this in combination and in collaboration with the Office of the President, with my brother, Mr. Abetu, shooting from that angle. We had a very successful year of return, and over the program that spanned a period of about 1 year, we took a lot of milestones within. And as you are aware, I'll bring you a few statistics to bring to bear. Over that period, we had an increase in international arrivals, that is visitors who came into the country, in excess of 1.2 million. That was a huge number. We had a lot of celebrities coming in, people we've heard just or seen just on TV, coming down to visit Ghana, and they came with their usual endorsements. We had a media coverage, an unprecedented media coverage, which spans from the big boys, CNN, Al Jazeera, BBC, and the big time magazines, Ebony and Co. When you get to social media, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on everything that you could think of. When they value the media presence that we chalked in the year of return, it was in excess of $6 million. That is how much Ghana would have paid physically to attract that sort of media attention. But due to year of return, we're able to chalk this. Now, out of these various successes that we chalked, at the tail end of the day, the government of Nana Akufo-Addo, I know my brother will speak with regard to what is coming from the presidency, sat down again, redesigned another program that will consolidate the successes of the year of return. And that is what you heard people mention over here, that is beyond the return. Fortunately for us, we are co-chairs between me and myself and my brother, Mr. Abedio, are the co-chairs of the Beyond the Return program. And this is a program that is planned over 10 years, from now to 2020 to 2030. And in there, we have designated or called 7 pillars on which the Beyond the Return will be resident. And these are programs and projects that we are going to develop, all in the hope of creating a tourism hub in Ghana and in Africa as a whole. Now, these 7 pillars includes celebrating Ghana, investing in Ghana, others have to do with pathways to Ghana, and all other things that we're putting together. One, to make sure that the year of return successes are consolidated, and 2, to make sure that we are putting together programs that will attract our brothers and sisters out there to come in. For instance, we take the pathway to Ghana. We sat down, we realized that within the formalities and documentations that allows our brothers to come in and join us, there were a lot of impediments and difficulties. So now these are legal and executive frameworks that are being put together to make their transition from wherever they are, be it in the US, in the Caribbean, in the UK, very simple and seamless in coming in here. So here we are looking at visa processes, we are looking at the pathway to attaining citizenship, naturalization, and even permanent residencies in Ghana. These are all things that we've done. And we know that very soon the senior minister is going to outdoor this to make it very public for Nananom to know. Now, why am I bringing this to the attention of Nananom? And presently, the world has evolved to a certain stage and period that your roles have completely changed. Instead of just being Nananom over localities and villages and towns, now you are even seen as the agents for change and development in your localities and towns and villages. Ironically, and unfortunately, I see this as very unfortunate because the laws of Ghana bars you from doing active politics. Meanwhile, it is within active politics that these developments are driven to your very area. The law says you can't do it. It's not a good thing. And this is one area that I believe you should fight. Because we all know, if you're not in there, normally they chop and leave you, or they chop and leave you small. So you definitely need to be in the helm of affairs in order to attract whatever your area and communities deserve. But I'm bringing it to your attention because the program that has been outlined under the Beyond the Return, that I said spans over 10 years, are programs that Nananom should position themselves as well as their communities well to attract. Because under the 7 pillars, there's one that says give back to Ghana. And give back to Ghana, our brothers and sisters from the diaspora are being given opportunity to put together programs or projects that will give them a lifelong and even immortalize them legacies within communities. Definitely your community will have to be attractive to bring whoever, the big boys or even the groups that are coming in, to come in there and invest. So Nananom, this is where faith has brought us. We don't have a choice than now to act as agents of change and development within our community. I've hinted you what we call as, I've given you headouts. Position yourselves, position your communities, and give out the right perceptions out there that will attract the people who are coming in under this Beyond the Return programs to actually invest. Then you would have satisfied the perceptions and what your people on the ground are looking for. Thank you so much. I hope this seminar will give us the right perspective to pursue these goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lawyer Kwame. You sound with some very good legal and sound advice that was shared there. At this moment, I'm going to also ask that your colleague, Director Obokese Ababio, he is, let me state for the record, I said I wasn't going to talk too much in between speeches, but let me say that he was also the chairperson of the Year of Return. And as he is now sharing the chair with Lord Kwame of the Beyond the Return. He's also, as I said, the Director of Diaspora Affairs at the Office of the President. So he played a major role in the advocacy of many of our brothers and sisters in the diaspora that many of you heard of this past November who received their citizenship. His office played a very strong advocacy role and continues to play that role in respect of the diaspora and making the necessary bridge of bridging the gap between those who are in the diaspora and those who are at home. So let us put our hands together and do a warm welcome for Director Obokese Ababio.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Hello. Thank you. Nana Osaberima, Nana Chiefttancy, Nana Obokese, and Nana, one of them, Pakali, Nana Kitia, Nana Penifoni, one of the three more with him, all the Nanas that are here about gathered. Penifoni, my co-panelists here gathered, my co-chair on the Year of Return, every one of you. I'm excited to be in your company and privileged to be asked to say a few words of support. There is no doubt that your endeavor needs support, and I'm excited that I have the opportunity to publicly state my support for this. And now Obokese in the US has been working hard, and I've been talking to him most of the time. We know what he's doing, and he has approached us on several occasions to facilitate what he needs to do to make sure that this noble objective that they have set themselves can be realized. And we are not hesitating in any way to do this. But let me first give you the three tidings from our president, the one and only president, Nana Adodamba Akufo-Addo, His Excellency. Nana Abia Weneniso, President who knows what is good and is good to do what is good. The Chief of Staff and everyone at the Presidency obviously sent me here to give you my good tidings, and to wish you well in your objectives. The President was here not long ago, and you might have heard what he has in store for the country. He adored the manifesto, that is the book, that basically outlines what future plans we also have as far as developing this country is concerned. Let me draw your attention to some few years back. Again, there was an opportunity to get a chance to put a case before Ghanaians, and he did come up, and the party came up with a manifesto. And in that manifesto, if you didn't know, was something that said the diaspora was going to be elevated. And lo and behold, came the year 2017, and he brought the Diaspora Affairs Office to the Office of the President, and whatever follows, you are all aware. It is based on that elevation, based on the elevation of the Ministry of Tourism to the cabinet level, that all subsequent events have unfolded to bear testimony to what was put in that manifesto. So come this year, this moment, last week, or another manifesto has been adopted, and in there are some things that are going to be very, very important for the development of the country. There is no doubt, you have heard from my colleague already, that the Year of Return was a big success. Big ideas are what transforms every organization, any group of people. If they are to make advances in their development, it comes from the fact that some goals, some vision is set, some idea is brought about, and people work all their lives to make sure that it is achieved. This president and this party and this government is in no doubt looking to do exactly that. That is why we have in place the basic education that will, the tertiary and the senior level education to be free for all to have that education. Because we know what we are taking this country. We know where we are taking. Very soon there will be the need to get everybody hands on board. They say we are not the way you are. We left it with Chobol, and Chobol will call for everybody's hands on deck. And to get everybody's hands on deck, we need to make sure that everybody is up to the level that is required. So, I suppose, it then becomes obvious that why do we have to be talking about all this this occasion? Because we are very honored to be in the presence of chiefs. African chiefs, we know your word already. No amount of any constitution, that leaves out your role, basically, determines how effective you are. There is no doubt, not in the minds of anybody, there is no doubt, irrespective of any constitutional provisions, that the roles that are played by chiefs is tremendous and is effective and is reliable, and it should be nurtured, and it should be, we should make sure that it is there to enable us to move forward. So I'm excited that Obokese has come up with this idea. I'm excited that Nana Chiefttancy has agreed that we should bring this on board, this village concept for the diaspora, because it is these ideas that would enable us to make sure that the future leaders who will be created, who are coming out of all these free SHS and everything, will be driven in the right direction, will be taken in the right direction, will be given the right ideas. It is time. We have done the necessary, I suppose, Obokese and all those involved in this objective have done the SWOT analysis. We have looked at our strengths and our internal, opportunities. Now we have to look at the external and look at the opportunities and the threats. And we have clearly identified that it is our education, which was wrongly given to all of us, that has led us to so cheaply follow the white people, whatever. We have been driven the way they wanted us to go, and we are all going that direction. We need to look inside and see how this university would be the cornerstone, would be the one that provides that opportunity for all Black Africa, for all Black people to know that something has begun in Ghana that they need to embrace. I'm impressed that this foundation that is being laid has got the support of the African Union, has got the support of the African Americans, has got the support of the government, has got the support of the people of Central Region. Because as Nana Osaberima has just said, it is not just a case of support from the FHA, but every one of you is behind it. And we thank you for that initiative, that support that you are going to give to this initiative, and that we know that with this government in place, with your support, of course, that it has to be in place, we can make sure that we can move this country forward based on these ideas. As I said earlier, these ideas that make up the country, these ideas that can transform an organization, the goals, the noble ones, that have to be cherished, they are achieved. That is what we see in the transformation of any organization. And we would urge you, as chiefs and people, as has been pointed out, you have a key role to play. You are going out, you are the opinion, not just opinion leaders, you are the architect of your environment, of your society, of your chiefdom, of your traditional areas, of your area of authority. And we would urge you to embrace the opportunity, the challenges that are being thrown to you, to see to it that these things will work. but above all, to make sure that you know where I'm coming from, and therefore I will urge you to give us, go out there and make sure that it is far more for the Nana to do exactly what we want you to do. We can work together as a team to really advance this. This is not a joking matter. We need to make sure that we can go forward as far as possible. I'll be surprised to know, you'll be surprised to know that the framers of our constitution were not just talking about 8 years and after that, it is after that you cannot really come back. Because they everything that if you had anything to do, you could realistically do it in 8 years. That is why, even though it is 8 years, in the middle of it, the country gets the opportunity to ask you to examine what you have done, to see whether you should continue. And I believe the time has come. Somebody has come already, they've examined it, and the country felt it shouldn't go ahead. Now is another opportunity for us to look at what is before us to see whether we can have more of the year of return. I can only talk about my sphere of influence, whether we can have the beyond the return. The beyond the return is going to be an 8-year, a 10-year program. That 10-year program starts from today. If you want the people to be in charge to be overseeing this program to work to the last end of it, then you need to make sure that you support it right from today. That is a plea I will implore you, please, and you support us in every sense of the word. If I've said anything that I shouldn't have said, because I'm talking to the Nananon, please forgive me. But if what I've said is anything that perhaps it needs our support, please, I will urge you to support us. Thank you.
Also very much, my senior brother, Obokese, Nananom, I think that we have to go to English because I hear from East Africa and all that. We have people listening in. But let me just say this greetings to Nananom. Mamona Hawajmenyado. It's been an honor to sit here and listen to the proceedings of what's going on. And I've been in the midst of working on a manuscript entitled The Awesome Responsibility, a study of chieftaincy of the Akan. Well, I won't use the word chieftaincy eventually, but now just for guidance. So bringing me back to something that I finished a long time ago and probably through the manuscript somewhere is really a difficult task. Well, all the same, let me try to say a few words to fill in the time that you've given me. First of all, I was very happy to hear the talk on the year of return. There is something very important about the year of return that we tend to miss. And that the year of return is beyond tourism. It's a return of wisdom, it's a return of philosophies, it's a return of knowledge, return of the spirits that are wandering about in the Middle Passage. It's a return of the African spirit, and it's a return and emergence of the African personality. That is the year of return. Until we have that focus, we focused on that, believe you me, the year of return will just come and go, and then we may not get anywhere in the end. So it's what do you call it? It's a timeline we've given to ourselves in the period, the year after, about what the African personality can come out and do for us. There are a lot of spirits walking, us in our beliefs in the Atlantic, wondering how to return home. This is the beginning of all of them bringing the knowledge they had and so on. So it's beyond the physical. The year of return is so deep that we need to, it's an intellectual thing. And I'm glad that it's also happening in Cape Coast, which was really the center of, what should I say, the intellectual reaction, the beginning of the intellectual reaction to colonialism as we got to know it. And then in Cape Coast too, a lot of events happened, and some of the people, the philosophers, some of us adhere to, like Sechism, as I call it, what Saba used to do, and the idea of even establishing an university based on what I would call a bibifology or a bibifoism, in Obokese, associated with Amenfi, is we say kudos to all of you. I remember that Kesley Hayford in his what's the name of it? Ethiopia Unbound wanted a university that wouldn't be touched by any form of Europeanism, but he had wanted it done in Kumasi. Of course, Kumasi right now too has been touched by has been invaded by Europeanisms. So perhaps going to Amenfi is also a good thing for all of us. Now, what I was supposed to do was to give an overview of African culture and governance and development. It's a very simple thing. Every governance or development system must be driven by a psychology. The dignity of any people is based on a psychology. And this psychology is always driven by self-knowledge, the knowledge which centers you in yourself as an African. This psychology is pushes your values and your value system. But if you look at Africa, you look as if we've been conquered. And they describe us as what? What do they describe us? Apes and so on. Recently, we had one fool describing this continent as a shithole and so on. Excuse my unchiefly language, but sometimes you have to come and speak it and say it as it is. And what has led to this? Because apes never originate. Monkeys don't originate, they just eat bananas. So you lost your humanity. Look at our women, our female world. All of us are interested in bleaching, or a lot of them just in bleaching their minds, being European in so many ways. On our televisions and radios, every day you hear her speaking, even in America, even in Europe. What, is that the end of the world? So these were the things that motivated some of us to write what we did, which interestingly, I got it from my real educator. And my real educator was my grandmother. So I dedicated the book to her. She was stark illiterate. And that was where I learned Africa from. But it reminds me about a Saheliad, Nana Bafo Amankwetia, as some of us call him, wrote a poem, a few verses to Hotep in 1985, which I like us to listen to, because it tells you about the problems we have and what we are struggling for. He says, our first mistake was that we thought of freedom as a place rather than a continuation of a struggle. Then he goes on, tyranny never sleeps. Our second mistake was that we thought of freedom as a goal rather than as a launching pad from which to reach our goals. Then he goes on and makes the comment, without purposes, freedom hardly matters. Our third mistake was that we thought that freedom made us free. That, however, is license, not freedom at all. Freedom is being shackled to identity, purpose, and direction, and being in constant pursuit. This was sent to me by Professor Small when we had a discussion about a few weeks ago. And it sort of shook me. It inspired me. And so I said, well, let me read this out for we, the Africans, when we are talking, because we talk about freedom and we talk about justice, not knowing that as our motto, Ghana's first motto, freedom and justice, is that we are constantly and consistently in pursuit of those two things, depending on the mission and the vision of this country as a whole. Now, no group in this world should be confused about its history, its culture, and its identity. If it does, it won't be successful. Who are we as Africans? What is our relationship to the society we are in and our environment? The politics we have, there are times I make fun when somebody comes and please forgive me this, and says, oh, Your Excellency. I say, what does that mean in Conte? Then you see that they'll be struggling with us. Oh, Your Highness. I said, but you're one kind of fancy. Sometimes they come in and say, your royal, because all these are concepts which is not us. They belong to a feudal culture which we have never passed through. And yet, we are busy feudalizing this country, creating class systems which have absolutely nothing. They are un-African. Our society was horizontal and not vertical. It was only vertical in the sense of the eldership complex. But the eldership complex relies on the fact that one day the young shall grow and also be an elder. So we've been working at a society right now, even our geographical area, spatially divided in terms of classes. Europeans had what? Royals, what do you call them? Nobles, peasants, serfs, and slaves. That has now been turned into upper class, middle class, lower class, and those of us always make fun about those from Escado who are or Skerita Kwadi who are underclass. And we are busy working this into our system and importing the same problems Europe has had and the same social agencies. And yet, there's knowledge lying out there, written by John Henry Clark, who was quite in Ghana, played a key part in Ghana, and established the African Heritage Studies Association. And the knowledge is just going fallow. Some of these things are there. Whenever you pick up the miseducation of the Negro, as far back, written by Carter Wilson, as far back as what, 1933. You read it and it's like talking about Africa today. You pick up Pete Biko and the young man, either Biko or Tiro, because the two sometimes merge in the things they say. The greatest weapon in the hands of the oppressor, or the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor, is the mind of the oppressed. We have our children and we send them to people who want to control us, who came here to oppress us, to train them. So those children that we sent out, including me at a point in time, become the enemies of Africa. Because we've picked up a value system that attacks my Africanity. When Kobna Sechi used to talk about these things in the 40s and 50s, he was seen as a madman, an iconoclast. Oh, Sechize. Meanwhile, he was saying the truth. And these are the things that informed that book. And I remember that the CPP manifesto in 1951 said something that if the people must be free, if the country must be saved, then you change the country to Africa. If Africa must be saved from imperialist domination and colonial misrule, they only can save themselves. We are the ones who can save ourselves. You don't rely on somebody else. Anytime you are an African and you hear any African country talking about donor support, it premises on the fact that you are sick and therefore you need a donor. And yet we've taken this, our sickness, who benefits from a sick Africa? Now, it is inconsistent for a culture whose stream of consciousness generates thoughts which deny the human worth of other cultures to engender respect for the beings of the denigrated culture unless there is an authentic upheaval with regard to the fundamentals of its consciousness. Colonialism. Sometimes people say it has a good side, has a bad side. It doesn't have any good side. It is evil, and evil does not generate good. Therefore, any culture that generates colonialism is incapable of generating good for the colonized space, period. Darkness does not generate light. If you use the Euro-Christian dictionary and framework for evangelization, colonialism is satanic. It is a criminal, satanic enterprise emanating from a culture whose hypocritical owners marks the reality of their selfishness, covetousness, and greed in a seemingly altruistic religions, philosophies, and ideologies to deceive the ignorant. Now, there's a philosophy of Ubuntu. It's in Fanti's best said is isisi anansia na isisi wawo. We are now in the period of insisi. And yet we don't see. We are in the period of greed. and yet we don't see. We think that these terms, these values, the value of greed, the value of cheating, the value of corruption, and I deliberately use the word because they are contradictions, but I deliberately use them. These are the things that will make us great. No way. Ubuntuism. And within it is the idea of Asuzi. But I could go on and on and on and on. The fact is that the book tells us, gives us knowledge for us to think about our misknowledge. You can't, if you don't know the world you are in, and I know Forata said that as far back as the 1920. You are in Ghana and you are busy learning about the things. You don't know your own philosophies. If I say the African is socialist or communal in nature, somebody may think that I'm going to take Marx. And yet Marx did not even regard Africa as part and parcel of his thing. We've imbibed and preached capitalism. And yet in our heritage, we know that slavery, colonialism, and then neocolonialism were fostered by what? Capitalism. It's been greed. Unbridled. Do we like our faces? So it's about time we went back into our consciousness. We reached to our ancestors. That is the year of return. That, I hope, is the meaning of the Obokese that Amenfi was talking about. Right? Reaching into our souls and bringing the best out of us. Bringing our value system. Creating the African, rediscovering the African family as it is, and building upon it. Without that, we're finished. Professor PLO Lumumba, I think, may be somewhere there, and he's from Kenya, and he knows the story of Wayaki Wahinga and what the British court system did to him. You don't pick up, nobody conquers you and brings laws into your world in order to free you. Mr. Lawyer, certainly I'm sorry, but the paradigm is wrong. It's a stupid paradigm. If you follow the God of your oppressor, you are finished. If you follow the laws of your oppressor, you are finished. You have your own laws. Rediscover them. That is what bound us together. So this is what really, I could go on and on, but for the sake of time, I don't want to carry on too much in that form. But colonialism is instituted by forms of violence. Have we stopped being violent? Violent doesn't necessarily have to be just physical. The violence on our minds, which Fanon talked about. We've been traumatized through slavery. Sometimes we think that slavery only affected those in America. What about me returning home and not seeing my sister, my father, or somebody there? So on the continent, we were traumatized because we're in a period of confusion. And then we were colonized. Then another form of trauma. And up to today, we haven't gotten out of that trauma because, as Latin Americans will say, we are colonized beings. We've colonized power. And you have privileged groups who become like the Uncle Toms. And all that they want to hear is, oh, the European master, that mastership hasn't gone. So refer to the European as your master, your teacher, the one who came to oppress you, take your goods away. Ghana has gold, and we talk about it. The chiefs are wearing gold, beautiful gold. How many mines are owned by Ghanaians? They will tell you that 98% of the mines are owned by people from wherever. Then you don't have gold. It is those who mine the gold who have it. We need to think, whose economics do we use? So this comes out of the idea of paradigm. Who has set the paradigm within which we work? In 1966, when Nkrumah was overthrown, the Harvard School, or a group of people in Boston, Tom Kellick and so on, came in here and re-engineered, much to the opposition of people like J.H. Mensah, and re-engineered our economy to be fixed and to be subservient to somebody else's economy. Most of us are not even aware of this. And we follow in that framework. In whose interest? In whose interest? It's rather sad that someone like Uncle J did not, Mr. J.H. Mensah did not write before he went away. Someone like that should have written. A whole lot of people should write, not just for Ghana, but for Africa. Every African is by nature, by spirit, a Pan-Africanist, because that's the way we were made. It is in our DNA. Why are we having problems with it? So this Obokese is carrying a whole load. The load for Africa is going to be in this university. And with that knowledge, and the real knowledge of self, believe you me, you won't get anywhere. Been trying to do, and wish you well. Thank you.
Experience? Somebody else's vision of what they think we should be? This regalia, this glory, this royalty? No white man wears that, but yet they teach our children in schools that we run around jungles naked. They told us that we had no culture. They called our language grunts and groans. They wouldn't even allow those of us who were taken from these shores to speak it. If we didn't speak English, we were punished for speaking our own language. So this cloth, weaving of cloth, the sandals, the jewelry, the parent queens, the setup of our traditional structures come from a rich culture of thousands of years old. So this is not the time to abandon it, because the black man, the African, cannot rise without our culture, without our tradition, and without our heritage. So let us bring back the Pan-African vision and redefine it for our age so our children can inherit what we inherited. A rich culture, but under attack, tampered with, tried to be destroyed, but it wasn't destroyed. So let's redeem it. Let's find value in it. And let us take that vision to the future. We're not going back to the normal. See, the Creator in His wisdom makes everything happen for good if we see it for good. We've been locked down for Corona-19. But with that, the whole world is on a reset. We're not going back to our old norm. We're going forward to a new world. Now, we don't need to be waiting for somebody else to lead us into that world. We need to put our minds together and exercises like this university to forge a new vision of how we see Pan-Africanism, African unity, and a new African world that we have designed for ourselves. Forward ever, backward never.
Allow me to start by acknowledging the organizers of this wonderful, wonderful event, starting with our own king of Asebu, King Akatai Amanfi VII, King Asa Berimba Kwesi Ata II, Nana Dr. Kaboni Nkesia, King of Esikadu, Honorable Akwesi Awa Ababio, our chief, Nana Obokese, Dr. George Fraser, Nana Kra Kwamina, Dr. David Whitaker, Nana Obokese Ampa I, Rabbi Kohan, P.F. Lord Lumumba, Ambassador Sir Hilary Battles, Vice Chancellor of the University of West Indies, Ambassador Thelma Brown of St. Kitts and Nevis, Ambassador Sidney Colley of Bahamas, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me by telling you how I feel so blessed and honored and lucky to call myself a proud Ghanaian wife. In my culture in Zimbabwe, when a woman marries, she gives herself up to the husband's family, and she marries all the men in the husband's family. The reason I feel so blessed today is that I can claim all the kings and chiefs who are on this program today. I'm proud and lucky to call all of you my husbands. So allow me to address all of you, my husbands and my sisters, as we talk about this wonderful, wonderful program that has been put together for us, but none other than Chief Obokese. Chief Obokese has been working tirelessly during the time that he has been here in the United States. And Dr. David Whitaker, Nana Accra, and Dr. George Fraser, they were right there with him to make sure that this event was a resounding success. Nana Obokese wanted me to talk about why is it so difficult for us Africans, for us Black people, to come together and build the Africa that we want. Allow me to take you back to 1963, when our Pan-African fathers met in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, at the invitation of Emperor Haile Selassie. They went to Addis Ababa hoping that they could come out with a united voice that would speak resoundingly to the rest of the world, that Africa was going to be united, that Africa was going to undo the damage that was done by the colonizers during the Berlin Conference. But sadly, when they went to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, they were divided. The first group were the Monrovia group. They were the nationalists. They said, let's go slow. The second group were the Casablanca group. They were the Pan-Africanists. They wanted Africa for the Africans and African Union now. Unfortunately, there were only 7 of them: Ghana, Guinea, Mali, Egypt, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia. This is when Kwame Nkrumah uttered the famous words, "You are not African because you were born in Africa, but rather you are African because Africa is born in you." Sadly, they had to reach a compromise decision to come up with Organization of African Unity. The issue of an Africa speaking with one voice was tabled. 1 year after the other, the heads of states would deliberate year in and year out. Unfortunately, the heads of states failed to reach a consensus. And as usual, of course, NATO would have been at work behind the scenes, making sure that any conversation that can lead to an Africa speaking with one voice, as one heart, one mind towards a common destiny would not succeed. Fortunately for us, April of 2018, once again, the issue of an Africa speaking with one voice was tabled. And this time, addressing the issues of trade. You see, you got to understand the whole purpose of dividing us up into the tiny little economies during the Berlin Conference was to completely throw us out of the loop and have all the countries chasing our tails, the inability to trade with each other, the boundaries that made it difficult, the language barriers, the difficulties in currency exchanges. That just left African countries, it's easier to trade with outside countries than with countries within Africa. It was all by design. So the African leaders felt that we must address the issue of trade. If we can loosen up the boundaries, remove the non-tariff barriers, allow single African passport, allow free movement of people, allow a single currency, we can see ourselves heading towards a truly unified Africa speaking with one voice. The first step on this journey is going to be economic liberation. It's going to be our ability to trade with each other as African countries. So April 2018, the African heads of states approved this monumental decision, which we are now calling the African Continental Free Trade Area. I'm disappointed and saddened when I realize how many people are not even aware of a decision that actually is the most important decision that has ever been reached on the African continent. A decision that everyone in Africa must know, everyone in Africa must support, for it is our only hope for truly attaining a free and peaceful and independent Africa that is both politically and financially liberated. This decision is due to be launched, implemented in 2021. It was delayed a bit because of COVID. We should have implemented it in July. The decision is saying 90% of the goods that are going to be traded within Africa are going to be duty-free. Liberalization, they're in the process of harmonizing trade policies. All issues to do with trade are being cleared up. Every issue that has kept us from trading with each other are being cleared up. When this is done, if it is done successfully, it will take Africa to a rightful place on the world stage. But for this to happen, the children of Africa must understand we have to speak with one voice. We can no longer continue to be brainwashed and made to think, oh, Nigerians are better than Kenyans, Kenyans are better than Malawians, and so forth. That Africans on the continent are better than the African Americans and vice versa. Those are lies that were told to us as Black people for the purposes of keeping us divided, for the purposes of continuing to exploit us. We must understand the brainwashing that has been done to the Black person. We must understand that we are part of somebody else's agenda. We must understand that we are actually sick from this disease of the legacy of slavery and the legacy of colonization. And that until we heal from this disease, no amount of decision on the continent is going to succeed unless we wake up from our slumber of over 400 years. Where we are, Your Majesties, Your Excellencies, brothers and sisters, we are at a crucial time in the history of our continent, in the history of our race. Let's look at what other races have done. Let's look at what other nationalities have done. 30 years ago, the Chinese diaspora did not ask, what did China do for them? They asked, what can we do for China? And they set out to do what needed to be done for their beloved China. And this is why we have the China that we have today. Look at what other people are doing. In my case, I can use an example of what I see every day. Ask for the voices of the Irish diaspora, loud and clear. The German Americans, the Italian Americans, the Chinese, the Indians, their voices are loud and clear. But when you ask for the voices of the Black people, you might as well go to the graveyard. We are too busy listening to the wrong voices. Voices that are telling you Africa is a diseased and dying continent. When the flights were still flying full force, half the time, if you go into a plane into Africa from anywhere, 75% of the people on that flight do not look like you and I. Even within Africa, 75% of the people in that plane do not look like you and I. And yet we are being told, do not go to Africa. It's a diseased and dying continent. Well, if it is a diseased and dying continent, why are they going there in masses? It's because there's something amazing and wonderful going on in your Africa. There's something amazing and wonderful that belongs to you. That is your inheritance. I'm saying this to say, my brothers and sisters, we are at a crossroads. If there was ever any time that we must wake up from our slumber, any time that we must acknowledge that we are suffering from the disease of legacy of colonization and slavery, not only are we sick, but we are in the intensive care. We need healing. And that means you need to have a serious conversation with the image in the mirror. Why do you feel inferior to our white brothers and sisters? because you were told they were superior to you. That was a lie. That was a lie. A bold-faced lie. Life as we know it began in Africa. If it were not for the black woman, there would not be any humanity as we know it. The first human being was given birth to by a woman. Now let's talk about who matters. So the lies that we have been told, we must understand them for what they are. Let's begin to undo the damage that has been done to us. Let's reverse the brainwashing, the issue of self-hate, the issue of distrust of each other. If we do not deal with those issues by having a serious conversation with image in the mirror, no amount of a decision can come out of Africa is going to succeed. Because at the end of the day, you and I, my brothers, we're the ones who have to implement those decisions. And if our minds are not in the right place, guess what? It's not going to work. We're still going to sell out our Africa. Where things stand right now, our continent does not have enough expertise to build the Africa that we want. That's a fact. Most of that expertise, because of the brain drain, our doctors, our lawyers, our accountants, they graduate, they are leaving Africa. We must reverse the brain drain. Those of us in the diaspora, we must begin to look and say, Africa is where it's at. The lies that we have been told, let's understand them. What's in Africa belongs to black people. That is your inheritance. Either we join hands and be on the driver's seat of the development agenda for Africa, or we can vacate that seat that has our name and allow others from outside to take over, which will be a very sad thing to do. If we don't come together and make sure that we defend our Africa, protect our children's inheritance, if we don't do it for ourselves, we have a responsibility to protect what's in Africa for our children, grandchildren, and generations to come. That we must do. Our children can no longer to live and suffer like we have done. We must put an end. We are inheritors of an amazing continent, the richest continent on earth. Our children must live to enjoy their inheritance. And this is why I'm talking to you today and asking you, each and every one of you, to have a serious conversation with the image in the mirror. Remind yourself that you're one of the most amazing, incredible human beings. You're not inferior to anybody. No one should ever make you feel inferior. You are an inheritor of an amazing continent. Stand up tall. Every step you take, walk this earth like it belongs to you, because it does. It belongs to you. Walk this earth like you own it, because you do. I'm asking you, my brothers and sisters, how bad do things have to get before we can wake up and say enough is enough? How many more George Floyds are we going to see before we say enough is enough? How much more exploitation can Africa continue to undergo before we say enough is enough? How long are we going to continue to let the multinationals continue to siphon money out of Africa, trillions every year? When are we going to say we're sick and tired of being sick and tired? Well, as a grandmother, as a mother, I'm there. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. But I do know one thing. If we get our minds together, I know my brothers and sisters that I have lived with, that I've worked with, the majesties on this program, and many other majesties around the continent, we are the beautiful, intelligent, sophisticated, highly adaptable, and totally indestructible children of one Mother Africa. I do know one thing. When I get that call to everyone, when we all receive that call from Mother Africa, I have no doubt in my mind that you're all going to answer that call. And if there was ever any time for you to answer that call, that time is now. So let's think about coming together, speaking with one voice. This university gives us an amazing opportunity to do just that, where we can stand on top of the tallest mountain and proclaim to the world, and speaking with one voice, one heart, one mind, let the world know that the children of Africa are now coming together and are heading towards a common destiny. And this time, our destiny, riding our own train, working towards a common agenda for us. I thank you.
The work that we're currently doing. Is it possible for someone to let me know if that is happening or not? Don't know. I would just move forward. I'll move forward and trust that you will be able to see what I'm sharing with you, and will receive my message. That what I want to talk about briefly is some of the research that we've been doing in Egypt for the past 12 years since we've been excavating two 25th dynasty tombs in Egypt. We are the first people of African ancestry to be doing this work. And this work follows in the footsteps of four scholars who are now ancestors who have influenced my work over the years. Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, Dr. Joseph Ben Yakinen, Dr. John Henry Clark, and Dr. Asa G. Hilliard III. I've had the pleasure of working with these brothers over 20 years ago, and their scholarship, their dedication to African people have affected me in profound ways. I want to just bring to your attention four fundamental truths that have intentionally been withheld from people of African ancestry, no matter where we are. This information is documented in an exhibition currently on display at the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History. And that is 300,000 years ago, Africans were the only human beings on the planet. 300,000 years ago. And that 60,000 years ago, Africans walked out of East Africa and began to populate Eastern Asia. And then 40,000 years ago, a group of these same Africans from East Africa walked west and populated West Asia, the landmass that we now know as Europe. And there are several maps that illustrate this migration of what is now regarded as the out of Africa concept, which shows how African people, as the ambassador just said, were the mothers and fathers of humanity. It gave birth to all people, so that everyone on the planet is a descendant of people of African ancestry. These are fundamental truths that we must know. We must understand that there is scientific and genetic evidence to validate these facts, and we have to begin to reorient our thinking to these known truths. So then another important aspect is that civilization began in the Nile Valley. It is in Egypt or the Nile Valley where we find the greatest evidence of civilization, culture, writing, architecture, engineering, all of those qualities that represent the greatness of a people. So I've been studying the Nile Valley for 40 years, traveling to Egypt for 40 years now. And the Nile Valley is significant because it is the world's longest cultural highway, 4,160 miles long, beginning in Zimbabwe, where the White Nile has its origins, also continuing in Ethiopia, where we have the Blue Nile. Those two rivers join in Khartoum and continue their spread throughout Sudan and Egypt and empties out into the Mediterranean Sea. We also have come to understand that while Africans migrated throughout the Nile River Valley for thousands of years, there also was a migration of African people from the east, from the Nile River Basin to the Niger and Senegal River Basins. So we navigated from south to north and also from east to west. And during these migrations, which have been documented by several colleagues of the late Sheikh Anta Diop, Obokese Lam being one of the principals involved in this research, they have documented 6 migrations of African people out of the Nile River Valley into the Niger and Senegal River Valley, bringing their cargo of knowledge with them over hundreds and hundreds of years. And what our research has begun to demonstrate now is evidence of this migration. And so I just want to share with you the work that we're currently doing in with the ASA Restoration Project, which is dedicated in honor of our dear colleague, Brother Asa Hilliard, who made his transition 13 years ago in Egypt at a conference. We developed the ASA Restoration Project and named it in his honor 12 years ago. It is my way of honoring an ancestor who was a dear friend, a colleague, and who supported my work. So by naming the project after him, we ensure that his memory, his legacy will endure for all time. We've been excavating now in an area known as South Asasif, where the star is. We now recognize this area as the first Kushite necropolis in ancient Egypt, which is on the west bank of Luxor, Egypt, which is the largest necropolis in the world, the most famous cemetery in the world. This area is near the Temple of Hatshepsut. It's near the Valley of the Kings and near the Valley of the Queens. So we are in a central location where some of the most significant historical personalities have been buried. Here's an aerial shot that was taken a number of years ago of the two primary tombs that we're working on, the tomb of Karabashkin and the tomb of Karakamen. Karabashkin, we now know, was a Kushite nobleman who was an architect and the mayor of the city of Waset, the city that we now know as Luxor and Karnak. He was responsible for restoring two of the most significant temples in Egypt, Luxor Temple and Karnak Temple, and also restoring the Avenue of the Sphinxes. It is a avenue, a grand avenue that extends almost 2 miles between these two temples, that is lined with 1,350 sphinxes on either side, connecting these two temples, and it was an area where incredible ceremonies were conducted on a regular basis. We also have been excavating the tomb of Karakamen, who was a priest of Amen at Karnak Temple. Karnak Temple, as you can see here in this illustration, hopefully, Karnak Temple was the largest temple ever created in the world. It was large enough to accommodate the 81,000 men and women, priests and priestesses who worked in this temple. And Karakamen was the priest responsible for doing the morning libations at the processional to the Holy of Holies of this temple, where his words and his actions literally brought into Kemet, brought into Karnak Temple the presence of Amen, which is the ancient African word for the unseen presence of God Almighty. So this man, Karakamen, was responsible for evoking the unseen presence of God in the largest temple complex in the world. 4 years ago, we sponsored a conference in which we brought together groups of scholars who have been working in the area, excavating and restoring temples and tombs related to the 25th dynasty. And on one day of this conference, we did a field trip to 2 tombs in North Asasif. And it was my first visit to these 2 tombs. What I found ways. It is in this area here where we found the tomb of Shashank and the tomb of Padi-Amenhotep. These are also 25th dynasty tombs that were constructed during the period of Nubian or Kushite rulers of ancient Egypt. It is a period of time in history where some scholars today still refer to as a period of black dynastic rule of Egypt, which suggests that the other rulers of the other 25 or 29 dynasties in Egypt were not black. That information is totally false. We know based on our study that all of the principal rulers of all of the most important periods of leadership and government in Kemet, ancient Egypt, were all established by indigenous black African people. So what I found painted on the ceiling of these 2 tombs was the heart-shaped Sankofa symbol. Now this was amazing to me because I had no idea that this symbol, which I had seen in Ghana on many occasions, and the symbol which we African Americans use quite frequently in order to mentally, spiritually, and emotionally reconnect with the land of our ancestors, in which we are encouraged to go back and to fetch the knowledge of our ancestors and use that knowledge to help us determine how we move forward into the present moment and the future. I was amazed to see this symbol painted on 2 2,700-year-old tombs. And I began researching how these symbols arrived in Egypt, and more importantly, how they were transferred from the Nile River Valley to the Niger River Valley, how these symbols and the culture associated with the people who created these symbols migrated from East Africa into West Africa. And so what I've come to understand as a result of reading the research was that there were 6 migrations of African people out of the Nile River Valley into the Niger River Valley, and that these people are connected by cultural traditions which we still carry in us. As was quoted earlier, Kwame Nkrumah said that we are African not because we were born in Africa, but because Africa was born in us. Africa is in our DNA. So even when Africans were taken away from their homeland and carried across the Atlantic Ocean and brought to the Americas 401 years ago, we still brought that message of Africa in our DNA. And so it's important now that we're in a position to reconnect these historical and cultural dots by doing the primary research. And what I'm now looking at is looking at the linkages between African Americans and West Africans, specifically Ghanaians, and the association between the ancient Ghanaian people and the Nile Valley. I have had the opportunity to speak with numerous Ghanaians, Africans from Senegal, Africans from Cameroon, and other countries in West Africa who say that their oral traditions trace their ancestry back to the Nile Valley. And at this critical juncture in my research, I am interested in finding more documentation to substantiate this fact. And so I am relying on my brothers and sisters in Ghana to assist me in conducting this research. This is a photograph from the African burial ground in New York City, which opened in 2007, 16 years after the bones of over 400 African men, women, and children were found in an African cemetery in New York City, in Lower Manhattan in New York City. And this incredible monument has been placed at this location. And again, the symbol associated with remembering these Africans is the heart-shaped Sankofa symbol, the same symbol or the similar symbol which we found painted on the ceiling of 2 tombs in Egypt. It is also important that with the opening of the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. in September of 2016, also inside of this building, there are several displays which talk about the significance of Adinkra symbols and establish the connection between African Americans and Africans from West Africa. And now we're standing on the precipice of beginning to expand our presence, our historical and cultural presence beyond America back to West Africa and beyond the borders of West Africa all the way across the continent to East Africa as well, so that we can begin to see a continued presence of African history and culture. We're now engaged in a project in Washington, D.C., which I refer to as the John Henry Clark Enhanced History Project. Dr. Clark frequently visited Ghana. He was a close associate of Kwame Nkrumah, knew Nkrumah when he was educated in the United States of America, and went to Ghana and wound up working with him on several projects in Ghana shortly after Ghana received its liberation. And so it is through the work that we're doing that we're going to be sharing with our brothers and sisters in the United States, work that we plan to share with our brothers and sisters in Ghana through Obokese University. We're going to be sharing with you information which I refer to as forbidden knowledge, information which is still not being taught here in the United States of America to this very day, but information which we have been privy to receive from our beloved scholars who are now ancestors: John Henry Clark, Asa Hilliard, Drusilla Dungy Houston, George M. James, John Jackson, Joseph Ben Yakinen, Ivan Van Sertima, Francis Cress Welsing, Chancellor Williams, Carter G. Woodson, and so many other scholars whose works are not known to a majority of people in the United States and on the African continent, who need to be aware of this mind-freeing knowledge. So we're going to be making this information available to brothers and sisters who are ready to free their minds and return to the source of human knowledge, return to the source of humanity. And so an essential part of our mental liberation is to go back and rewrite the narrative, to put history in its correct context, to be able to tell the story of our migration from the Nile to the Niger to the Potomac and the Mississippi and the Hudson River, to show that we are a continuation of the development of African people, history, and culture. And an important part of this story, it is a 5,000-year journey of African excellence, African greatness. And when we put this story into its proper historical and chronological context, we will find that the Ma'afa, the great disaster of the enslavement of over 100 million African men, women, and children, is just a small portion of that story. As John Henry Clark often reminded us, that the story of African people could be written in a book of 1,000 pages. The story of our enslavement would begin on page 996 and would only be 2 pages long. So it is our job, it is our goal, our responsibility to tell the story of the people who have been written out of the respectable commentary of human history. Tell the story of the great and mighty walk of African people. Share that information with Africans in America, Africans in the diaspora, and more importantly, share this knowledge with Africans on the continent so that collectively, with a transformed mind and transformed consciousness, we will be able to restore the world to its rightful place of knowledge and power and do the work that our ancestors who are living in us would want us to do. So I am grateful to have had this opportunity to share my brief comments with the brothers and sisters in Ghana, brothers and sisters throughout the continent, and know that by us working together, we can transform the times that we're currently living in from perilous times to times that are fruitful and productive and will lay the foundation of the brave new world that will follow us. And long after we are gone, we trust that they will pour libation and call our names because we stood up to become the courageous men and women who did the work that needed to be done to restore history and culture to its rightful place. I thank you all very much for your time and your attention, and I look forward to joining you in Ghana in the very near future. Thank you very much.
Bring you greetings of peace and blessings. Very thankful to my brother Tony Browder, who just presented before me, whose work has deeply influenced mine as I have researched African-centered education over the years. I want to talk about the question, what is African-centered education and why is it important now? Again, what is African-centered education and why is it important now? This is a very timely question that we must answer, but before we get into it, I want to first begin by giving honor to our ancestors, because there's an African proverb which says, if we stand tall, it is because we stand on the shoulders of our ancestors. Or as Dr. Jacob Carruthers has said, indeed our stride is wide because we're walking in the footsteps of giants. I want you to also know that this information that I'm going to share has been deeply informed and influenced by Nana Bafora Amankwechia II, also known as Dr. Asa Hilliard III. And I happen to have heard earlier today Nana Kobina Nketsia mentioned Dr. Hilliard's work along with that of Dr. John Henry Clark as well. I want to also give special thanks to my direct elder, Nana Kwamina, and also give honor to Nana Obokese. What is African-centered education? There are many different definitions, and the research literature is very expansive on what African-centered education is. I sought to codify and bring together many of those definitions into a shorter definition that we could all grasp and understand, because we're constantly having to teach our people what this is. And so African-centered education is centering ourselves and our students in the best of African culture. And we do that to examine and analyze information, meet needs, and solve problems in African communities. Now, I want to go back through this because there are about 4 parts to this definition. So let's start right here. Centering ourselves and our students in the best of African culture. One of the things that's going on right now in America is that many of our children and many of our people have not been centered in the best of our culture. They've been centered in the worst of our culture, which leads to what Dr. Molefi Asante calls decentering. So we've been decentered and taken off of our terms. So African-centered education then helps us to center ourselves and our students in the best of African culture so that we know what the standard of excellence is. Once we understand what that standard of excellence is, that African standard is, then we use that standard as a benchmark to examine and analyze information through our lenses. Examine and analyze information through our lenses because, as Du Bois taught us many, many years ago, we've been looking at ourselves through the eyes of those who despise us. And so an African-centered education will allow us to examine and analyze information through the lens of that which is in our image and in our best interest. And so in addition to that, we use African-centered education as a means of meeting needs and solving problems in African communities. If we're not meeting needs and solving problems in African communities, then we're not involved in education. We're involved in schooling, and that's very different than education. Schooling is for the purpose of reproducing current power relations. And if right now Europeans have power over African resources, African minds, and African bodies, then the purpose of schooling is to reproduce that reality. We don't want schooling anymore. As Mwali Mushuja has said, there's too much schooling and too little education. So African-centered education helps us to meet needs and solve problems in our communities, rather than being trained to meet needs and solve problems for Europeans and other non-Africans. So this is the definition of what African-centered education is. But through my research and through my practice, we've also come up with 14 elements that define what African-centered education looks like in authentic practice. And I'm going to run through these 14 items very, very quickly, very mindful of the time that we have. So the acronym for African-centered education is ACE. ACE places Africa, African people, and African points of view at the center of all things studied. Oftentimes, our views, our values, our standpoints and perspectives have been on the margins of history because somebody else was writing the history and writing us out of history. So what African-centered education does is it places us back in the center of all things studied so that we can view all phenomena through our unique cultural lens and our unique cultural perspective. ACE also requires an African value system. So for example, here in America, we live in a very hyper-individualistic society. And hyper-individualism, period, is a Eurocentric value. That's a European value that is at variance and in conflict with traditional African values. African culture is communal, cooperative, and collective. And so an African-centered education requires an African value system. African values such as ma'at, truth, justice, righteousness, reciprocity, balance, order, and harmony. An African value system such as Ubuntu, I am, because we are, and because we are, therefore I am. There are many African values that we must be reintroduced to and put into practice. Thirdly, African-centered education helps students critically examine how the subject or object of study is related to the image and interest of Africa and African people. Many of the images that we see in popular media are not in our authentic image. These are alien images, countercultural images that have been constructed in the deformed mind of Europeans to make us look subhuman. So many of these images that we see not only in popular media, but also in school textbooks and in school curricula and syllabi are not constructed with African scholars, African-centered scholars that are in our image and in our best interest. Number 4, African-centered education taps into the spirit of the children. Many of us live in a society that is based on this notion of the separation of church and state, as if you can separate the spiritual from the material. Those who have been centered in authentic African values understand that there can be no separation between the spiritual and the material. The spiritual is the substance of the material, and the material simply gives form to the spiritual. So African-centered education taps into the spirit of the children. But many of our children are in schools and school systems that attempt to despiritualize them and take them away from their African-centered. African-centered education, number 5, requires a sharp orientation towards social justice. In other words, you cannot be said to be educated and stand by and watch your brothers and sisters be slaughtered in the street. You cannot stand by and claim to be educated and not speak on behalf of the best interests of our people. Moving on to
of what African people can do. I'd also like to thank King Obokese for his vision and foresight to follow up on President Akufo-Addo's declaration of the year of return, to recognize that the year of return has less meaning unless people have something to return to. And so it's his vision and engagement in this ongoing project of our restoration and transformation that has brought this Obokese University into its fruition. And that's been done primarily through the vision of Nana Obokese Ampa I, who recognized that if you have a reason to come home and someone has given you an opportunity to stay home, then there has to be something that orients you into understanding of what home means and what are you coming to and how is it going to impact your development, your transformation, your future, and the future of all of those that will interact with you. So I want to thank all of those people that have been responsible for today's program. I would like to certainly say to all the Nananom that I am overwhelmed with this program, and I'd like to share a brief story to tell you what my feelings are. I logged on to the program this morning to find out that it wasn't active yet. I finally was able to get onto the platform only to find that I was in the back room. I was in the waiting room. And I started to become anxious because I was the only one in this waiting room. I'm looking at a dark screen, and I started to feel the impressions of what it must have been like to languish in the dungeons of Elmina and Cape Coast, wondering what's going on outside. And there's no one with you, and there's just darkness in front of you, and your mind begins to wonder about whether anybody has responded to the invitation I sent to the Nananom. Maybe no one showed up. And if they did show up, maybe this glitch has been too overwhelming and they decided to leave. So I'm experiencing all of this anxiety until finally I saw a message that said the program will be starting shortly. But shortly lasted a lot longer than I anticipated. And I felt that this was just a trick. The program really wasn't starting shortly. And maybe it wasn't starting at all. But eventually I saw a message that said the program will start in a few minutes. But a few minutes took longer than a few minutes in my mind. So I was still worried. But finally the program started. And as the cameras scanned and panned the room, I almost burst into tears to see all the Nana sitting there, which confirmed that not only did they receive the invitation, but they thought the invitation was worthy of their participation. And there they were, all seated, and there was tears in my eyes to let me know that the people are ready to do something that brings us back into our right consciousness, our right minds, and we are capable of responding to things when the time is right. I want to revisit just a couple of things I said in the invitation. I termed it as a VIP invitation, which is exactly what it was. It's very important people that were invited to this program. And as I think of my studies of history in the process of colonialism, in the process of enslavement, and the words of Ambassador Chiefttancy echo in my mind about the Berlin Conference. The Berlin Conference set off the first scramble for Africa. And in that scramble for Africa, the Europeans wanted to accomplish three things: to occupy a country that they determined was their own, set up their social and financial and economic and educational systems that would fuel and perpetuate their interests, and exploit the people, exploit the land for its resources, exploit the land for its minerals that would help them to develop their nations. So this is what we've lived under. This is what Ghanaians have lived under. This is what all of Africa has lived under for some period of time. So with Kwame Nkrumah's presidency, he triggered the alleviation of one of the three objectives of colonialism, and that was the occupation. Once Ghana gained its independence, it set off a cascade of other independences as well, until at this point all the African nations would consider themselves independent. But that was only one of three of the pillars or the structures of the three-legged stool that the Europeans put in place. The end of the occupation didn't end the effectiveness of the social, political, economic, financial systems that were put in place to serve the Europeans. It didn't take that away. Nor did it take away the exploitation of the African people, their resources, or their minerals. It didn't take those away. What makes me most enthusiastic and excited about this program is, in my mind, the invaders who decided to scramble for Africa and take what they wanted. One of their main objectives had to be the total destruction or co-option of the chieftaincy. Because the chieftaincy, after all, is the biggest symbol of African culture on the continent. So the fact that the chiefs are sitting here today on this program, participating in this seminar, tells us that the chieftaincy is indestructible, and it's alive and well. And it's only through the chieftaincy, which other people have said today already, it's only through the chieftaincy that we have a hope of dismantling and terminating the other two stools on this colonial table, that of the social, economic, financial, and educational infrastructure systems, and the bringing end to the exploitation of African people, Africans' minerals, and African treasures. And so I am comforted today by knowing that everybody in this room, and I'm 5,000 miles away, the same 5,000 miles that our ancestors were forced to travel when they were removed from the continent to the West. And I'm hopeful now that we have opportunities to actually bring ourselves back into our rightful minds and back into our rightful positions, because we understand full well that the future of Africa and the future of Ghana depends upon the training, the education, the understanding that we give the next generations. The Africa today we have, the Ghana we have today, is the Ghana that the educational system has created. So if we're unhappy with it, we know what we're really unhappy with is the educational infrastructure that has produced the people that we have allowed to be in charge. So if we want something to go a different way, we have to create different people so that they have a different understanding about who they are, where they've come from, and what they need to do. So I just want to thank everyone associated with this program. I'm 76 years old right now. I'll be 77 in November. And I believe that in my own lifetime, I'm going to see the realization of what our scholars, our ancestors have talked about, dreamt about, begged us to do. And the people in this room right now are going to be the ones that set off the initial charge to bring about this reality. I'm humbled to be with you. I'm so appreciative of this opportunity. I'm excited about the future, and I will do anything that I'm called upon to do, God willing, until my dying breath. And I thank you so much for being here, and I'm prepared to work in earnest until the end of my days. Madasi B.
Wow.
Yeah.
Acting with you, that no matter what hour you receive a WhatsApp or an email, within 3 minutes you're responding as if you actually don't have any time to sleep. So not only for this 10 minutes presentation that you gave us, but thank you for your hard work throughout the season, rain, shine, day, night. Thank you very much, Nana Madasi B. So as we are moving, I'm just giving one more shout out back to Dr. Chiefttancy. If he's not connected, we're going to be moving to one of our last presenters, which is Vice Jose Core. He's connected. Yeah. All right. It's the former president of the Ghana, of the Municipal Union of Ghana. Someone I've had the pleasure of working with on many different fronts. But we're inviting you in to share a few words with us, and as we are each. All right, very good. All right, continue. My brother, welcome back.
Okay, brothers and sisters, I was told that I was where I left off. You may need others to mute themselves. So the sixth essential element of African-centered education is that African-centered education requires methods that are unique and indigenous to the nature and needs of African children. Many of our children are in schools and school systems where they're struggling and suffering because the teachers are not using methods that reach and captivate African children. And so African-centered education requires not only the content, that they're learning the truth about who they are and where they come from, but the methods that the teachers use that are unique and indigenous to the nature and needs of African children. Number 7, African-centered education requires a consciousness of victory. It doesn't dwell on oppression. We have an analysis of oppression, and we don't become silent in the face of oppression, but we don't dwell on oppression. African-centered education requires a consciousness of victory, that we are African people and that we will win, and we know we will win, and our oppressors know that we will win when we come together. And so it requires a positive outlook on our present circumstances and our future. Number 8, African-centered education asks the simple question of all things that was brought to us by Dr. John Henrik Clarke and also echoed by Dr. Marimba Ani. And it is simply this, so simple that a little child can understand this. Is it good for African people? Very simple. Is it good for African people? Haki Madhubuti takes it up another notch. He says, is it best for African people? So that when we look at neo-colonial practices that are happening in Africa, on the continent, amongst Asians and Europeans, or when we look at what's happening in America or Europe with our people, we must ask the question, is it good for African people? Is it best for African people? Number 9, African-centered education requires an understanding of the Pan-African perspective. This is so very important and so critical because we are African people wherever we happen to be on the face of the planet, whether there are continental Africans, meaning that they reside or are from directly from the continent, whether there are Africans in Europe who have gone there to live or to go to study or to university, whether it's Africans in America, African Americans or Caribbean Africans. The Pan-African perspective is very important because, as Dr. John Henrik Clarke has taught us, when we come together, we number over 1 billion people. That is a force to be reckoned with. But it doesn't matter if we are over 1 billion people if we are not of the same consciousness moving in the same direction. So African-centered education requires an understanding of the Pan-African perspective, which has been advanced by so many of our leaders. Number 10, African-centered education promotes understanding and appreciation. Understanding and appreciation. And please forgive me for just a moment because I can't see my screen here. But it promotes an understanding and appreciation for all cultures. There are many lies where people will have us to believe and tell other people that we're promoting hate. We're not promoting hate, we're promoting self-love. And it's very interesting how others will project the hate that they're putting out into the world and project that onto us as if we're doing that. African-centered education promotes an understanding and appreciation for all cultures. Number 11, African-centered education requires the restoration of African history and identity. African history and identity. We know that there are others who have taken on the role of writing our history for us, and in the process written us out of history, which is deeply problematic. And so we understand that we must write our history and rescue and reconstruct our history first, as Dr. Malana Karinga says, and put it back into the hands of those that created it. So African-centered education requires the restoration of African history and identity. We've been victimized by cultural identity theft. And there are those that have stolen our cultural identity, stolen our story to gain access to our wealth and our resources. So for us, education is identity restoration. Again, education is identity restoration. Number 12, and the reason there's a star or an asterisk next to number 12 is because this is one that I've added to the list very recently. African-centered education requires social-emotional learning strategies to help resolve the multi-generational unaddressed trauma of the Ma'afa. The Ma'afa, of course, is the catastrophic interruption of African sovereignty and civilization by way of slavery, by way of lynching, by way of castration, by way of rape, by way of theft of resources. That's the Ma'afa, and it's still going on. We have been over 400 years without therapy from dealing with the daily physical and sexual abuse as a result of the Ma'afa. So African-centered education requires that teachers and leaders understand the social-emotional learning strategies to help resolve the intergenerational unaddressed trauma and the multi-generational unaddressed trauma that has been passed on generation to generation. Number 13, African-centered education requires an understanding of cooperative economic empowerment strategies, that we have the resources within our control to bring about the resurrection of African people. Far too often, we place ourselves in a situation of dependence upon European or Asian economic infusions that compromise African sovereignty. So African-centered education requires that we teach our students how to pool their resources to meet our needs and also how to produce everything that we need. And lastly, it all comes down to this. African-centered education prepares our people for sovereignty. What is sovereignty? Sovereignty, once again, means that we are able to produce everything that we need in order to live, survive, and thrive. Sovereignty also means, from a Pan-African perspective, wherever we happen to be on the planet, it means that we have community control where we are, and we have African cultural continental connections wherever we are to defend our mutual interests wherever we happen to be on the planet. These are the 14 essential elements of African-centered education. And brothers and sisters, I will leave you with this last thought. And it is simply this African proverb. And it simply says that if you dream of moving mountains tomorrow, you must first begin by moving small stones today. I'm honored to participate in this conference, which is an example of some of the small stones that we must move today to move mountains, to bring us back and restore our people to their traditional greatness. And I am here to assist in serving this purpose. Thank you. Peace and blessings.
And if not us, who? So let that be our closing note.
Amen. Amen.
I think we do have some of our ushers who helped us do the snack also direct us and how we ought to make a move to